Viewers, it's my pleasure to be back with you and to have Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma talk about Dr. Swami and his interaction with Dr. Swami. Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma, as you all know, he is the president of Virat Hindustan Sangam United Kingdom, and he has been with us on many hangouts. Today, we're going to talk about Dr. Swami and his interaction with NRIs. What were the contributions? What are the things that happened? It's a very freewheeling discussion. And before I hand over control to Panditji, I just wanted to mention to our viewers, unfortunately, because of some issues, I'm not able to go live for the next few days until we sort this issue out with the YouTube. And also, we have had some problems now for over 10 days going live on Facebook. And the evident reason for these two, I'm given to understand, is a certain conversation that PGurus had with a certain Swedish journalist about Sweden burning. Now, viewers, you will be able to see this video. We are going to provide you a link at the bottom of this in the show more data for this video. And you can see and decide for yourself what is it that people found objectionable about this video. So once again, my apologies. We will be back as soon as possible. But today we're going to talk to Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma ji. Pandit ji, welcome to PGurus channel.
Pranam Sriji, a pleasure to join you as always on this lovely summer's evening here in London.
Yes, summer's going, gone, isn't it?
It is. The last few days of summer are with us. And I think it's probably a great background to talk about the light that Dr. Swamiji has been, the ray of summer sun that he's been for so many people. You and I have been talking off camera and just observing some of the Twitter campaigns against him, some of the nonsense that's being peddled. It seems to have started all over again. And I think it's worth people like us who have engaged with him, who have assessed him, who have also attached a little bit of personal credibility to Dr. Swamiji's reputation as well, to try and set the record a little bit straight. I think we have a duty to speak out as well, and let's see whether we can share some of our own insights as we've walked with Dr. Swamiji.
Absolutely. And viewers, my interaction with Dr. Swami started around a few months after the 2014 elections. And before that, I used to be in touch with him via email. But this was a complete, like a cold call that turned into a friendship that I cherish and I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And it's been a Shishya Guru kind of a relationship as far as I'm concerned, because I've had so much to learn. Even a 5-minute conversation with him energizes me and makes me look in so many different directions. So Panditji, where did it begin for you?
2014, I think, was a year which influenced all of us. Prior to 2014, I'd come across Dr. Swamiji's work as an economist. So most people are not aware, but my first education, my core education, was actually mathematical economics. And so anybody who has done any econometrics will have encountered Dr. Swamiji's peerless contribution to Samuelson's work. And so I was aware of him as a Harvard economist. And then on the sort of periphery, we were also aware that he was a person who many people were saying was controversial, that he was a powerful individual, a mover and a shaker, but you had to be wary of him. All sorts of sort of peripheral noise was very much present. I was aware of some of that. Now, in 2014, I had been thrust into the limelight in London because of some legislation that had caused us a problem. And in 2014, I'd also noted the appearance on the Bharatiya stage of our respected Prime Minister, Honorable Narendra Modi ji. And I think it would be amiss of me not to take advantage of the opportunity to wish him belated birthday greetings. But I was aware of his appearance on the scene. And so in 2014, I decided, myself and my eldest son, who's also into political theory, we decided to visit New Delhi and to participate in the buzz of the election, to enjoy New Delhi's election fever. And so we arrived in New Delhi and started to just put ourselves out about a little bit, contact a few friends, contact a few political contacts, and see what was going on. Now, through a mutual contact, I managed to get Dr. Swamiji's phone number and just placed a call completely like yourself, unsolicited, a random stranger phoning out of the blue. And Dr. Swamiji picked up the phone. We spoke for no more than 5 minutes or so. And immediately he extended an invitation to visit him at his home. And we could participate and see some of the results that were coming out. And so I leapt at the opportunity. We went and visited, and he was a generous host and very open, very frank and very direct. And it was quite refreshing to be able to contact and communicate with him so easily. I remember asking him, what was it? Within 5 minutes, he came to a judgment which enabled him to invite somebody into his own home, passing all of the Z category security and everything else. And I can recall him saying to myself and my son that he had been training professors and he'd been training politicians and engaging with some of the most advanced intellectual students and academics for a long period of time. And he had learned how to gauge genuine, authentic people who had attained a degree of maturity and who were going to be interesting for himself as well. So he was quite enjoying the exchange as much as we were. And I think that was the first indication that I had that there were no airs and graces. There are many political figures where it's almost like trying to gain access into Swarg, that you have to pass a Dwarpal who is as bad as Ravan was when he was in that role, just to get a glimpse of them. But there was none of that at all. It was very much a frank, direct and open exchange. And that was where it began. So my journey with Dr. Swamiji started at the 2014 elections. Now, as I said, I had a bit of public prominence at that time here in the UK, and a number of people, when they heard that I'd been engaging with Dr. Swami, their remarks and comments were, oh, he's a spent force. He used to be a noise on the political scene in India decades ago, but that's all history. Don't waste any time, and so on and so forth. But I must admit, I was impressed more by the character of the man and not about political aspirations, not about trying to curry favor, as the Brits used to say, but just about engaging with a person who carried himself with a degree of comfortable confidence and an air of quiet nobility. Somebody who can throw back their head and laugh out loud from the belly with complete abandon and no sense of self-consciousness. It's an indication of somebody who's stable, tranquil, and very comfortable with their own personality and what they're doing. And so I was getting a great deal of encouragement and joy from just being in the company of somebody like that, with no political aspirations or indeed no intentions of becoming in any way prominent. And that was the beginning of a wonderful friendship. Now, in that time, since 2014 to now 2020, 6 years, and those 6 years, I think, have seen an immense amount of turbulence, haven't they? India has gone through all sorts of upheavals, Europe, the UK, the US. We're engaged in a very advanced stage of Samudra Manthan in every country. And over those 6 years, we've observed, I certainly have personally observed, a steady, determined commitment to the welfare of Bharat from Dr. Swami. And I think that's the first thing. I've noticed that his loyalty is actually to Bharat, the nation, as probably one of the remaining Sanatan Dharmsthans, which is still vibrant. And that's his loyalty and that's his commitment. So this became very clear to me. So
yes. I'm sorry, go ahead. Please go ahead. I thought you were, yeah.
I was just going to say, so when it comes to people passing judgment, how do you judge somebody like Dr. Swami? And I think it's probably worthwhile for me to share a little bit of a perspective as to how I've come to understand him and to place a value on such a person. It's very hard to do. Now, if you look at when Dr. Swamiji appeared on the scene, we're looking at a post-colonial India. Now, most people are not aware, but in clinical terms, in the language of medical psychology, if you assess the personalities and the characters of the British colonialists who left in 1947. If you assess them from the point of view of medical sociology, psychology, psychiatry, it's undisputable that they qualify as being categorized as psychopaths and sociopaths. There are medical definitions for these terms. And so if you look at the work of Robert Clive, if you assess Lord Hanning, if you look at the work of our famous butcher of Jallianwala Bagh, if you assess them and put a template of medical psychiatry, they're clearly psychopaths and sociopaths. And these are the people who molded the administration, the systems and the bureaucracies of India, and they molded the people to populate them to serve a colonial power. So we, in 1947, whilst everyone was talking about a new dawn, if you look at the actual practical mechanisms of government and governorship, they were systems created by psychopaths and sociopaths, populated by a population who had been enslaved and traumatized. They were psychologically damaged people who took on the responsibility of trying to create a nation. And it's also worth remembering that although the British left at that time, their intentions did not leave. Their desire to extract benefit from the jewel in the crown, from which they had taken £45 trillion worth of benefit over a couple of hundred years, those desires didn't evaporate overnight to be replaced by magnanimity and generosity and philanthropy and all of those sorts of ideas. The intention was still very much that India would play a role in the great game, be a subservient nation, to be manipulated by the garrison state of Pakistan. So this is the reality into which Dr. Swamiji entered and appeared. So, sorry, yes.
So, couple of observations, sir. At PGurus, we published an article which talked about some of these things, about how East India Company, which was probably even less than 22,000, the general metaphor is 22,000 people were trying to control 220 million Indians. And something is going to have to give, something, it's going to be employed, like, there was no carrot and there was a lot of stick. This was the, intent of the article. But, you are absolutely right. If you go back and read the history of how East India Company gained ground in India, it was almost always where they would side with the lesser of a claimant to a particular throne, promise him that we will give them the support, and then fight alongside with that person, help him ascend to the throne, and then start turning the screws on. And pretty soon, that person has lost his thing, and East India Company basically acquired that piece of land, that kingdom, and this salami thing starts spreading all over India. That's what they really did.
Yeah, it was nothing other than land-based piracy.
Yes, yes.
And I think I would love to hear somebody rebut on a scientific basis my proposition that they were clinically psychopaths and sociopaths. That would help us to better understand where we started from, and that we inherited, this enslaved, traumatized governmental system was actually nothing other than what I call Macaulay's minions. He had molded by that time successfully a mindset which was almost like a colonialist asset, wasn't it? It was a civilizational asset that could be used to execute your needs and demands and then be handed down to your followers. So it's almost as though Macaulay handed this little group of Macaulay's minions and passed them to his successors. And even to this day, we still see that army of Macaulay's minions, sadly not realizing that they are stooges in somebody else's game plan, that their life, the value of a human existence that they could have enjoyed, was stolen from them even before they were born, that they were programmed to fulfill the wishes of an alien colonizing power. And so this is the reality of what the Indian the India of 1947 onwards was. And this is the reality in which Dr. Swamiji was formed. My proposition is that as somebody who was instinctively, or with the blessings of his parents, family, gurus, somebody who was instinctively a dharma rakshak, finds themselves in a society which is built on adharam, serving adharam, with the mechanisms of governance designed to serve and sustain adharam. Now that is naturally going to be a cause for conflict. And so this is where I think Dr. Swamiji's journey starts. And if we're going to assess what he did, why he did it, and how he did it, that's the backdrop against which we have to measure his activities and his contribution. And Einstein made a famous saying, if you're going to measure the value of a fish using its capacity to climb trees, then it will always be found wanting. So you have to measure the capacity of fish by measuring its capacity in the waters in which it was swimming. And that, I think, is where we should start in judging and understanding Dr. Swamiji. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely agree with your viewpoint, sir. And there are so many anecdotes that we can share, but the time is limited. And Satishji, I would like you to perhaps share some of those things with our viewers. And I, perhaps on a different date, I might do my own personal recollections. That is for a different day, because I would like to listen to you. I'd like our viewers to listen to you. I think they are kind of getting tired of listening to me talk all the time. So it's yours.
You're modest and you're generous, but thank you. So let me expand on this little proposition further. So that's the backdrop. Now, it's a person of greater wisdom than myself said that to be perfectly adjusted to a profoundly damaged and ill society is not a measurement of achievement and success. Now, this is a wonderful statement, especially if you bear in mind what's happening in Bombay. In Mumbai now, we have all of those pillars, those people who are the pinnacle of success in Mumbai society, the high society. They have achieved success within a profoundly ill social structure. And the reality of that success is now being displayed. And so somebody who challenges the systems which continue, they perpetuate and support a profoundly damaged and ill society, that person is going to receive the feedback and the flashback. Everything is going to come back onto that person. Speaking truth to power, especially to corrupt power, is not an easy thing to do. And especially when that corrupt power is all pervading, it has its place in the health systems, it has its place in governance, it has its place in politics, it has its place in the executive and in the judiciary. A person who places his loyalty to dharma and to the nation is going to suddenly find himself outside of all of the structures of society. And so this is how I see and try and understand what Dr. Swamiji has done and when he has done it and how he has done it.
So, viewers, just to add to what Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma ji alluded to, I'm shameless in terms of propagating my own book, but this talks about that nexus that has formed over the last 15 years, 12 to 15 years. The politicians and the Bollywood and the cricket players, and another IPL is around the corner. And this book is going to be available in paperback form in a few days' time. And you need to go back and look at how all this started 25 years ago, and then in the shape and form that it is in today. There's been only one person who has stood strongly against this, who knew the inner workings, who could not be corrupted, who would not bow, would not bend before these people. This is almost, the majority of politicians in India have, at least the one that have achieved success. If you think of those who are successful, they would have had something to do with this potent mix that we have now in India. And I've said this before, and I'll say this again: don't feel bad when your team loses. Don't feel happy when your team wins. It is all a spectacle. It's a tamasha. Somebody's making money off of all these spectacles, and for what it's worth, Please do not gamble on IPL or any cricket event. That's all I can say from my side. So let's get to some specific instances, if
So,
you will.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So let's just have a look at that. I've identified that the structures of governance have been deeply corrupted. We had a population who were given a democracy, but the population itself did not have an understanding of how a successful democracy absolutely demands the complete engagement of the population. Now we are seeing what happens when the population decides to engage with democracy. Everything that's happening in Mumbai, Dr. Swamiji's 10 million Twitter followers, Ishkaranji's broadcasts, it's a popular movement. And what's happening is that our populations in India and here in the UK and elsewhere are waking up to their responsibility of engaging with democracy. So that's a brilliant development. And yet, when we look at it, Dr. Swamiji was leading the democracy of the energizing of the democracy and the democratic responsibilities of our country for a long, long time. He was way ahead of the curve on that. It was pioneering work. Now, this democratization and energization of the people is absolutely necessary when you're going to challenge all the systems of governance which are corrupted. But there is one system which is outside all of that, and it's unique to Bharat. And that is the parallel network of our gurus and our rishis and the paramparas. No other nation has the guru shishya, guru rishi paramparas that we have. We are unique in that. Bharat is the only country that has that. And if you have a look at Dr. Swamiji's relationship with the core, original knowledge infrastructure of Sanatana Dharma, he has always had the respect and the blessings of our Shankaracharyas and our Swamijis and our sants. And that says something very, very important. One infrastructure which, shall we say, feels and has felt threatened by Dr. Swamiji ever since the word go was the media, the social information structures, the literature festivals, all of the voices which supposedly carried news to that democracy, to the population, all of those used to serve this corrupted Macaulay's minions, Sepia, Sepoys, this army. And that machinery, that ecosystem, is very, very powerful. It's what protects the society which is corrupted because it's a child of that society. And so when you think of the pressure that somebody like dear Kanganaji is currently under, Dr. Swamiji has had that pressure for the last X number of decades. And whenever any particular member of that ecosystem has felt threatened, they have turned the taps, focus on Dr. Swamiji, and away it goes. And so their longevity, their capacity to sustain this, to withstand it, I think that's also something that is a huge pointer to the manner in which Dr. Swamiji's personal character is in front of us. One of the charges that I came across, which had been placed at Dr. Swamiji's door, was that he has betrayed people who were close to him politically. Now, everyone knows that politics it works on many levels. There is a thrashing around on the surface of these waters and lots of noise, but then underneath it, there are deeper currents. Now, many people change their positions on those shallow levels, but other people swim in those deep currents. Dr. Swamiji is one of those people who swims with a sense of those deeper currents because his loyalty has not been to who's thrashing around on the surface of these waters. His loyalty has been to the principles which are needed for our dharmic civilization to thrive and prosper. So absolutely, when you have politicians who on Monday are aligned to a dharmic principle, you'll find that Dr. Swamiji has supported them. When they have suddenly aligned themselves to another principle, which is contrary to his connection with dharma and the bigger picture, then he would happily say, I'm sorry, I can't support this. It's illegal. I'm sorry, it's not constitutional. And so his loyalty has never been to something as shallow as an individual, their political career, or a party. All of these are the trappings of a political infrastructure. They're not the vessels which capture a dharmic vision. And so you can easily understand, if you monitor his movement and his decisions, that he has never supported anybody in an act of illegality. He has never supported anybody in an act of constitutional compromise. Those are the guiding principles, because he's always been loyal to the idea that they are the ultimate reflections of what a democracy uses to manage itself. If you actually tamper and undermine those, then where do they go to for justice? And that's why you can judge and understand Dr. Swamiji's determination to adhere to dharma, but complete comfort with the notion that if a party gets to a stage where it's not serving dharma or the nation, then happily it's time for it to disappear and for something new and fresh to appear in its place. Now that, I think, is a wiser way of understanding some of the decisions that Dr. Swamiji has made. There is one final aspect, and then I'll draw what I'm saying to a close, and that is seasons. As you know, I come from village farmers in Punjab. That's where my early years were. And I remember somebody saying to me that there are people who have only seen spring and summer. And those people shout and make a lot of noise and make big promises and everything else. But it's only when you've also survived autumn and winter many times that you understand a much larger cycle. And at this moment in time, we have a lot of people who are intellectually very agile, they are very eloquent, they're very erudite in terms of their expression, they're able to speak at length, and yet they have only seen 2 seasons. Dr. Swamiji is one of those people who have seen many seasons, and there's a great deal that we can learn from somebody who has seen so many seasons. So if you judge Dr. Swami, you have to place him in the context of the society in which he has been fighting and for how long he has been fighting it, and the value systems which immediately are apparent to any person scrutinizing his actions and indeed his character. And so those people who at the moment think that they can make a temporary little bit of gain or create a little bit of splashing around on the surface of the political waters by attacking Dr. Swamiji with social media campaigns, they're sadly mistaken. They really should look at themselves and adopt a slightly more mature strategy, one which might generate benefits to them and indeed benefits to everybody else. At this moment in time, such nonsense is merely water off the duck's back, and everybody, I think, is beginning to recognize and see it as such.
And to add to what you just said, Panditji, this is for many NRIs. And I'll just give you one instance where, I was, it was a discussion, but I was also in a bit of a disagreement with Dr. Swami. And we were going back and forth for a few minutes. And then he said, listen, you come from an objective world. I live in a subjective world. So this doesn't work. In my world, this doesn't work. And that was the clincher, because at once I understood what he was trying to say. Please, many of the NRIs, we all feel like, oh, well, I said this and I didn't get this thing back. Because what happens is, many of us are very quick to come to judgment. And then this is something that perhaps is a result of where we live in. And, we are constantly judging the other individual. What is this person's success? And these success factors are, I will leave it to you. But this is where you need to understand that this does not bring you happiness. It brings you some other things. It does not bring you happiness. And I think what we, Satishji and I, in fact, if it was not for Dr. Swami, I would have never met Panditji in person. And I don't know if you remember the first time I came to your house, Panditji. I come there and I have lunch, and I'm basically holding fort in your kitchen, and you have all these visitors coming to see. I'm like, what have I done here? But at first, it's just that you made me feel so at home. And then Dr. Swami comes in, so many dignitaries are coming in. It was a blast that I had. But most important thing in all this stuff is, he is a man who has weathered many a season, many a 4-season year. And don't just look at one isolated instance and then say, this is what it is. And then, you basically have extrapolated that and you're doing it wrong. That's all I can tell you. You need to know the good doctor to understand where he stands on things and why he takes a certain stand on things. It's not that he doesn't change his mind either. He does change his mind. It takes a lot of effort on your part to convince him that this is not the way it is. This is the way it is. I've had those experiences also. Panditji,
Yeah.
if you could just add to that, and then we can call this conversation to a
Sure.
close.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that are worth bearing in mind as well when we try and understand somebody like Dr. Swamiji. And at this moment, intellectual prowess is actually held in high esteem in the West. You know, the US has never had so many highly qualified Harvard lawyers and Stanford and Princeton academics and economists from the Berkeley and MIT. All of these are very high intellects, and yet the nation is struggling on the verge of civil collapse. So intellect is something which we have a better alternative for. Wisdom is totally different. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishnji says that yoga is excellence, is perfection in action, in execution. Whatever you do, do it perfectly. And if you have a look at Dr. Swamiji's capacity to execute, it's peerless. His understanding of what was required to bring the legal process to a rapid and timely conclusion in the situation at Ayodhya was the catalyst which suddenly created an environment in which a decision could be made. That is excellence in action. That is perfection in execution. And that same devotion to perfection in execution is present in the manner in which the Ram Setu issue was addressed, the manner in which Sonia Antonia, jo bhi hai.
Maino.
Bas wohi. The manner in which they were dragged into a courtroom in the dock as the accused required excellence in action. The mystique just evaporated around them ever since that one catalytic point. If you think about what's happening in Mumbai now, we are also seeing a huge deconditioning of the Bharatiya population going on. Suddenly those who only 3 months ago were gods on Mount Olympus, that and people used to gather outside Amitabh Bachchan's house, right, and laud him and gasp for a vision of him on a daily basis. Suddenly they're looking at each and every one of these characters and saying, hold on a minute, what was I thinking that I didn't see through to the reality of what the situation is? And so we're all undergoing a process of deconditioning to see the satya behind all of these things. And people like Dr. Swamiji are actually catalysts for helping us pierce these veils and work with the reality of things. And so I think that that's one of the most important contributions. Just imagine the contribution. 60, 70 years of the Indian National Congress being the gods on Mount Olympus, and now 40 seats from 400 at one time, right? This is a massive achievement, and the achievement is significantly due to the fact that people who led these imaginary palaces and power structures suddenly were revealed as being very poor human beings. And that requires somebody with a particularly highly evolved vision, perception, and capacity to execute. And that is absolutely phenomenal. I think in Dr. Swamiji, we have seen that. We are suddenly beginning to see Sanatanis recognize that we have the right and the responsibility, and indeed the capacity to be genuinely noble. And when you're with somebody who knows and is genuinely noble, it's infectious. Suddenly your spine becomes straight. You're able to actually articulate from a position of courage, and all of those things are deeply, deeply character and sadhana-based achievements. They don't come through intellect and degrees and PhDs and qualifications and slaps on the backs by people like Wendy Doniger and Audrey Trushka, who's also at the moment being hammered beautifully by our media. These are the activities of people who have learned from Dr. Swamiji's example. The capacity to stand up and say, no, we have a civilization. It's a peerless civilization. It's a noble civilization. And we want to share it with you. It takes courage. And I think Dr. Swamiji has led the way in making us all get to that stage where we can actually see that that's the reality. What an incredible contribution. Bearing all that in mind, I think it doesn't take too much for us to recognize that we're all human, right? And we all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Most of us make more mistakes than Dr. Swamiji has ever made, and very few of us will make the contributions that Dr. Swamiji has already made.
Yes, indeed. And I have questioned what I call as the awkaat of some of the people who will be dissing Dr. Swami, saying that win one case, even at a municipal court, just win one case. Then, then you are allowed one tweet. So this conversation of
Absolutely.
this conversation of ours, Panditji, we have said a lot without saying anything. And for the intelligent viewer, you look at any developing situation in India's politics today and apply and listen to what Panditji just shared with you today, you will be able to know where the compass of truth is pointing to and where the dharmic needle is there, which pointing to. And that shall be your lodestar. And I hope that this is what you need to look at. Don't look at individuals, don't look at political parties, don't look at events. Look at what is the truth, the ultimate truth. That is what, as a Sanatani, you and I are supposed to do. I hope we all do this thing. It is very difficult to do, but at the same time, that shall be our goal. And I hope personally that has been my realization in my existence, and as in this particular birth of mine. And thank you very much, Panditji. Again, this was a very different kind of conversation for you viewers. I think you need to sit down and reflect on what Panditji shared. It's very, very important, because even as I'm saying all these things, I'm kind of playing back. And there's another thread running in my head, which is playing back what you just said. And I was saying, yes, yeah. So there are lots of bulbs going off there. So thank you once again,
Yes.
Panditji. And we'll be back with more interesting conversation. This M2 that he mentioned is very, very important, because these have spread themselves all across the world. And they're doing the work of their masters, which, I'm sure Macaulay, we always say somebody is rolling in his grave or he's turned in his grave. This guy is probably smiling from heaven, looking at it. Look what a generation of people have created 200 years down the road, and they are still faithfully taking it and marching forward.
Sriji, our contribution by just putting into the public space the phrase Macaulay's minions, right, is going to be huge, because I can see people now suddenly looking at characters like Susanna Roy, or Arundhati Roy as she likes to be seen, Romila Thapar, and all of these people, and recognizing them with a sense of reality and piercing through the veils and saying, actually, oh, there's another Macaulay's minion. And those poor characters, hopefully they will still have time left within this lifetime to recognize the manipulation that they have actually been experiencing and suffered from, and perhaps do something to reverse the karma associated with it. So yes, we have had a wonderful session. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really grateful that you allowed me to do this, because not many people, I think, can pierce through their conditioning to see the reality of the depth at which people like Dr. Swamiji, Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, and very few other people genuinely work at. We have to look past our capacity to be triggered at a shallow level and always look a little bit deeper and try and see what the bigger picture is. And then suddenly you start to see the scale, the magnitude of the changes that these people bring. And they are pivotal changes. A time will come when people will look back on this time and be able to say with pride, I actually lived in the same time when Prime Minister Modi ji, and very much more so Dr. Swamiji, also lived. That will be a mark of pride for us in the years to come.
Absolutely, sir, and I couldn't agree with you more. Listen, these are our recollections, and these are something that we're going to cherish for the rest of our life. That's what I started out by saying, and I think you're absolutely spot on, Panditji. Thank you once again, and we'll be back with more interesting conversations such as this one. Namaskar.
Namaskar ji, pranam ji, and be well. Stay safe.